It's May 326 BC, and it has been raining for a week. Alexander is standing on the bank of a swollen river in the Punjab at 2 in the morning, in a thunderstorm, and on the far side of that water is a man named Porus with 200 war elephants. Alexander has never fought elephants. Nobody in his army has fought elephants. His horses have never seen an elephant and will, when they do, decide they would rather be somewhere else. So he does something strange. For several nights running, he has been marching his cavalry up and down the riverbank, making noise, crossing nowhere, going home. Porus watches, Porus stops reacting, and on the night the storm breaks, Alexander takes a detachment 18 miles upriver in the dark and crosses where nobody is looking. He is 29 years old. He will win this battle, and it will be the last one he ever wins, because a few weeks later, his own men will look east toward the Ganges and tell him no. Now hold that image and move forward 1500 years. A boy on the Mongolian steppe is wearing a wooden collar locked around his neck. He's a prisoner of a rival clan. His father was poisoned. His family was abandoned to starve. And right now, his entire military career consists of being someone else's captive. His name is Temujin. He is going to escape, and he is going to conquer more land than anyone in human history. Two men, two of the best commanders who ever lived, so let's actually compare them. Not on vibes, on what they did with what they were given. Round 1, the army. Alexander inherited the best army in the world. That's not a dig, it's just true. His father Philip had spent 20 years building it. The sarissa phalanx, a wall of pikes 18 feet long that nothing on foot could get through, and the companion cavalry, heavy horse, trained to punch a hole in a line at full gallop. Philip took a backwater kingdom that everyone else in Greece thought of as barely Greek and turned it into a professional military. Then he got assassinated, and his 20-year-old son inherited the whole thing. Alexander didn't build the machine. He inherited it, and then he drove it further than the man who built it ever imagined. Genghis had no machine. He had a steppe full of tribes who had been raiding and murdering each other for centuries, including the ones who had enslaved him. So he built one. And the way he built it is the thing people underrate. He organized his men in tens. 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. Simple, but the important part is who went in each unit. He deliberately mixed the tribes together so that the man beside you was not your cousin. Your loyalty had nowhere to go except upward, to him. Then he added a rule. If one man ran, his whole unit of 10 was executed. Nobody ran. Round 2, the hardest day. For Alexander, that's Gaugamela, 331 BC, open ground in what's now northern Iraq. And Darius has picked the field himself. Flat, cleared, perfect for chariots and for wrapping a much bigger army around a smaller one. Alexander has about 47,000 men. Modern estimates put the Persian force around 100,000, and the range historians will argue about runs from 50 to 250,000. The ancient sources say 1,000,000, which we can ignore because feeding 1,000,000 men in one place in 331 BC is not a battle plan, it's a fantasy. Alexander advances at an angle, drifting right, pulling the Persian left out further and further to keep from being flanked until the Persian line stretches and a gap opens in the middle. And he goes straight through it, personally at the head of a cavalry wedge aimed directly at Darius. Darius runs. The Persian army, watching its king leave, decides the day is over. Alexander loses somewhere between 11 and 1,500 men and gains an empire. For Genghis, the hardest problem was Samarkand. And it wasn't a battle, it was a wall. He has about 50,000 men outside one of the great cities of the Islamic world, defended by tens of thousands of troops and, for good measure, 20 war elephants. And here's the problem. Mongols are horsemen. Horsemen do not take cities. A nomad army standing outside stone walls is an army that starves. Except Genghis had already solved this years earlier in China by capturing engineers instead of killing them. He arrived at Samarkand with Chinese siege technology and men who knew how to use it. The garrison sortied out with the elephants. It went badly for the garrison. Most of the defenders surrendered within days. The citadel held out about a month, and then it didn't. Alexander solved his hardest day with genius. Genghis solved his by noticing what he couldn't do and going to get it. Round 3, logistics. This is where wars are actually won, and it's the round nobody talks about. Every Mongol rider had 3 or 4 horses with him, When one tired, he switched, and the tired one kept walking without his weight on it. That single arrangement is why a Mongol column could move 40 to 60 miles in a day while everyone else in the 13th century managed maybe 15. They also carried dried meat and dried milk curd, and in a genuine emergency, a rider could open a small vein in his horse's neck and drink. An army that doesn't need a supply train doesn't have a supply train to defend. Alexander's army moved on grain, and grain moves on carts, and carts move on roads. He spent a genuinely enormous amount of his time thinking about ports, harvests, and where the next depot was going to be. He was very good at it, but he made exactly one catastrophic logistical decision. On the way home in 325 BC, when he marched a large part of his army across the Gedrosian Desert. The sources disagree on how many died. They agree it was the worst thing that ever happened to his army, and it wasn't caused by an enemy. Round 4, what finally stopped them? Alexander was stopped by his own men at a river in India by soldiers who had been walking for 8 years and wanted to see their families before they died. He sulked in his tent for 3 days. It didn't work. They went home. He died 3 years later in Babylon, aged 32, undefeated in battle, and his generals immediately began carving up the empire and killing each other over the pieces. Within a generation, his family line was extinct. The thing he built did not survive him by much. Genghis died in 1227, and the empire kept going. That's the whole difference in one sentence. His commanders, Subutai, Jebe, kept campaigning without him. 10 years after his death, Mongol armies were in Russia. 15 years after, Hungary. The empire reached its greatest extent under men who were taking orders from a system he designed rather than from him. So, who was the better general? Genghis. And I don't think it's especially close, though I'll give you the case against in a second. Alexander was the better battlefield commander. That's not in dispute. Nobody has a cleaner tactical record, nobody read a battle faster, and at Gaugamela he did something on the day that most commanders in history could not have done at all. But he was handed the finest army on earth and a father's worth of preparation, and what he built on top of it dissolved within about 20 years of his death. Genghis started with a wooden collar around his neck. He built the army, the command structure, the discipline system, and the doctrine, and then the machine went on conquering without him for decades. Alexander won battles. Genghis built a thing that won battles when he wasn't there. Here's what would have to be true for Alexander to take it. If the question is purely who you'd rather have commanding your line on the day, with the enemy already in front of you and the ground already chosen, then it's Alexander, and it's not close in that direction either. So it depends entirely on what you think a general is for. Tell me which one you'd pick in the comments and be specific, because Alexander obviously is not an argument. Thanks for watching. If you like videos like this, the battles, the tactics, and the parts of history nobody teaches you, subscribe to the channel. New videos every week, and I'll see you in the next one.